Good morning, members. Welcome to this meeting of Social Work Services Committee on Tuesday the 1st of February 2022. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off video when you're not addressing the meeting. And should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write "speak" in the Teams chat function or indicate to the clerk, and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. If your question or issue is being raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so we can deal with the business as efficiently as possible. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, could I remind you to write leave in the Teams chat function for the period of time, and if you could write join when you come back in, that allows us to monitor the member presence. Okay, so start the meeting then proper. Sederant and apologies. Claire, could I get a note of the Sederant and who's participating remotely, and any apologies, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. For the benefit of members on Teams, there's 3 members present in the Council Hall this morning. That's yourself, Chair, the Vice Chair and Councillor Sloan. There's a number of members present on Teams, currently Councillors Dookie Campbell, John Campbell, Howie Ingalls, Lever, Little, Maitland, Murray, Tate and Wood. Currently I have 3 apologies, being Councillors Bell, Karen Crothers and Councillor Dempster. So currently not present, although it may change by the end of time I get to the end of this. It's Councillors Charteris, Ferguson, Giusti, McGregor and McClelland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire, for that. And maybe a few members might turn up. I know some people have been experiencing some IT issues connecting, so we'll see what happens. Do any members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? I don't see any hands up or any indication in the chat, so we'll move on then to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting. This is for noting. Are members happy to note the minute?
Noted.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 4, which is Social Work Services Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 21-22 for the period ended the 2nd of December 2021. This is an overview of the financial performance against budget for the period ending 2nd of December, or quarter 3, and we've got Janet Sutton as the Finance Officer with us to assist with any questions. Janet, is there anything you'd like to say to the report?
I have nothing to add to the report, Chair.
Thank you. So over to members. Any questions on the report in front of us? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up yet or any indication in the chat function. I know sometimes there's a wee bit of a delay, but that's probably enough time. So I think we'll just go to the recommendations in that case, which is to note 2.1 and 2.2, which is basically based on the position at end of December. We're acknowledging a forecast to overspend by 521k against the budget, and 2.2, progress against the delivery of the policy development allocations. Happy to note?
Noted.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 5, which is the joint inspection of adult support and protection in Dumfries and Galloway partnership area. So I think we'll welcome Lillian to speak to this initially. Lillian, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So I wanted to bring to members' attention the outcome of the joint inspection of adult social care and protection within the Health and Social Care Partnership Dumfries and Galloway. I don't intend to go over the whole report, but I would like to just draw members' attention to a couple of points. You will see that this is a different way of reporting from the Care Inspectorate. They normally grade, as you'll be aware from previous inspections. However, during the period of this inspection and the COVID impact, they have given us overall feedback, which I hope members will see is relatively positive. and they've also given us 3 recommendations in terms of development, and an action plan is currently being drawn up to make sure that we give assurance on those 3 areas. I would also wish to say to members that out of the comparative local authorities and partnerships that have had their adult support and protection, then Dumfries and Galloway are in a favourable position in terms of the positive feedback from the process and the inspection. We absolutely accept that we still have areas that we need to improve, but I do feel it's really important that we reflect that this inspection was undertaken in the midst of a global pandemic and at a time when we were dealing with huge increase in demand for all aspects of adult support and protection. And I would like to acknowledge a very special thank you to Heather and Gordon Pattinson, the Public Protection Manager, who led on the inspection. And as members are aware, inspection brings a whole amount of work in terms of planning and preparation that we have to do to provide evidence. So I'm happy at that point to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Lillian. And yeah, it goes without saying that given the context, I think the report has, been very reflective of how well we've actually done in context. Over to members then. Any questions or comments on the report? I can see a hand up. Councillor Ferguson.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm having difficulty with my screen here. Can you hear me okay? Because I seem to have difficulty.
No, I can hear and see you fine. There's a wonderful view of the Nith there behind you.
Well, thanks very much, Stephen. Firstly, Lillian, it's nice to see you back in harness. I hope you're keeping well. The question I'm going to have, I think, well, no surprise to Lillian. It's about the areas for improvement, and I noticed that there's a plan has to be in by middle of last month. Well, it's only a fortnight ago, isn't it? And I'm wondering if we can when we'll get a chance to see what that plan is, or what are the plans for making the Social Work Committee aware of what improvement we're going to, or how we're going to tie up the improvements with the relatively small areas where we need to improve. There's no performance as such, it's just it seems to be some sort of communication stuff and things like that. Just be interested to see what Lillian's got to say about that.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. Over to you, Lillian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ferguson, and yeah, certainly glad to be back. So just to say that the improvement plan has been submitted, and we will just wait now for the Care Inspectorate to come back and agree that that is the actions as required. Certainly happy if members would wish for us to share that plan with members of the Social Work Committee, and also to give regular updates at whatever time interval members feel would be appropriate. We're very confident that we'll be able to make some of the progress required, but of course some of it is around current resources and challenges with our colleagues in the partnership, particularly on the acute side. But we're certainly working hard to make sure that we address the 3 areas for improvement. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. And Councillor Ferguson, I think as well, on page 51 it does allude to the preparing of the improvement plan to address the priority areas. So maybe that's, I don't know what the sort of timescale would be for us to see that before us at Social Work Services Committee, but does that help answer your question?
Yes, it's the assurance I was looking for. I'm happy to take Lillian's word that it'll come back to us once, because I understand how it works. It has to be agreed by the inspectorate first. It's not us. We don't agree it, but then we should just saying it'd be really good for us to see, so that we can be assured that the service is doing everything it needs to do to improve. That has to be said, very small area within the wider plan, within the wider inspection. So yeah, I'm happy with that, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor McKee in the room and then Councillor Campbell online.
Thanks, Chair. It's paragraph 3511 on page 24. it says that staff were less positive regarding participation in multi-agency training and development opportunities and the level of staff involvement in self-evaluation activity to inform improvement in adult support and protection work. Activity was low. I take it that'll be getting addressed as well. Lillian.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. Over to you, Lillian.
Yeah, that's certainly an area that we're aware of, and we had already started to do some work on that. So I don't know if Heather would wish to add anything to that point, but without a doubt we're aware that we need to get the training back on track, but some of that has been around, as I say, during this period of time we were very heavily involved in Respond, as we continue to be. But absolutely acknowledge that. Thank you, Chair. Happy for Heather just to give a further update. Thank you. Thanks,
Lillian. Heather?
Yes, I can just confirm that during the period we addressed the most important and urgent sort of training needs as we went. So we had to prioritise, given that we had to then shift things fairly quickly online. And that brings with it its own challenges in terms of how you actually deliver training. And so, yes, I can understand the frustration that for some staff, because they won't have been able to get the same level of service that they would have previously had. But it's something that certainly the Learning Development Subcommittee has its priority, is about how do we then shift as quickly as possible to a position whereby we get as much of the face-to-face training as we need back working, and we will probably go with a hybrid model which will combine the two in order to get the best from it all. But yes, it's a really important area and always has been in terms of adult support and protection, to ensure that the whole workforce, and particularly in terms of people coming in to the workforce, that we ensure that people have got that right level of skills. So it's very clearly within our action plan, and we will continue to address that.
That's fine, thanks. I think we've got to recognise the difficult times that we've been through in the last couple of years, that these sorts of things are not always going to be able to be addressed. Thanks, Chair.
No, thanks, Councillor McKee. And I think just from what Heather's said there, would be familiar to many services in the move to go online. It's been not necessarily a smooth journey for everybody, and it's made necessary a number of transformations to the way we do things. So there's bound to be a few glitches along the way, but I think we've done well in spite or because of that. So, Councillor John Campbell now.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Good morning, Lillian. It's probably following on the back of Councillor Ferguson's points about the priority areas on page 23. I suppose I'm kind of looking for assurances. The second paragraph from the bottom of the page, the key processes effective with areas for improvement. There were clear strengths supporting positive experiences and outcomes for adults at risk of harm, which collectively outweighed the areas for improvement. It's that last part of the sentence. I mean, for somebody like me or a layperson, it's kind of it's the statement that the areas for improvement don't seem to matter. So it's really just a case of getting the assurances, and I'm sure that will be the case because a lot of work has gone into this particular report. So it's just to get that assurances that the key areas for improvement or the priority areas are, top and in front and centre of the, the way forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Campbell. Lillian, do you want to provide that assurance?
Thank you, Chair, and happy to do so, Councillor Campbell, and absolutely note your point. I think, what we're very clearly saying is that this is a quote from the Care Inspectorate after the inspection process, that they were very clear that, for us as a partnership, that there was a lot of real positives that very much outweighed those areas for improvement. However, that would not at any level make us complacent about the areas for improvement. We always welcome external scrutiny because it gives you that, one, assurance that we're on the right pathway, but also highlights areas that we need to continue to improve. And I'm very clear that as a partnership, we will continue to work to make things as tight and processes as robust as possible. So I can give you my absolute assurance and that of the team that we will be taking everything on board, particularly the improvement learning from this inspection. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. And I think Heather wants to come in to add a wee bit more.
Just to give the assurance, Councillor Campbell, in the way in which we've done the improvement plan is to focus very clearly on those 3 priority areas. And so they've in a sense, given us our structure. But we've also taken a really thorough look at the report. So in addition to the priority areas of improvement, we've ensured that anything else that the Care Inspector talked about throughout the report, that talked about maybe the things that we might want to look at, we've done that and we've included that within our improvement plan. So when you see it, you'll see a really thorough approach. But certainly set within that focus of the priority areas of improvement are those that we need to address immediately as we can and as we go forward, really. And certainly the one around timescales, you know, that's a piece of work that we had already started even before, I suppose, the ink was dry on the inspection report. You know, so a number of the areas we've got, we were already aware of them and already doing some work. So we're really positive about the progress we've made so far, even sort of at this point, and we're hoping then that when that report comes back and the sort of progress on the improvement plan, you'll be able to see that.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry, Chair, can I come in?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I do appreciate everything that's said. It just worried me when I read the sentence, but I'm reassured, so thanks very much.
Thank you. And I'll bring in Councillor Sloan first and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Chair. I mean, reading through the document, I don't think we could say it's a great document. It is quite good, and most areas in Scotland would probably be glad to have it. But there is room for improvement. Continually we read it throughout every aspect of the report, room for improvement. So I would like to have seen a synopsis of all the recommendations for approval. Those that have already to be done and those that haven't yet been done. Would that be possible, Chair?
Thanks, Councillor Sloan. I mean, I think I would imagine that would be part of what we would see in the plan when it comes back to us. And so I would wonder, one, will it include the information that Councillor Sloan's requesting, and also when would we likely see that? You know, obviously there'll be a turnaround time for us to actually get that back to this committee or members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sloan. I'm sure the action plan will give you that assurance and it will give you the detail required. However, if you don't feel that's enough, then we'll be more than happy to provide any information required. We will need to wait for the Care Inspectorate to come back and confirm our action plan. We would be very hopeful that you'd be able to receive a copy of that in the coming weeks. I certainly wouldn't think it would be much more than that, but we're bound by their decision to come back and accept our proposed and submitted plan. But we'll certainly get that to members as quickly as possible. And if that detail required is more, then more than happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe presumably all members might want to have access to that as a matter of course.
I'll give that to all members. I'll distribute that action plan once we've got the agreement from the Care Inspectorate. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Chair, for letting me back in. Maybe a wee bit of latitude, if I'm allowed it, because I was actually just going to ask Lillian if or what kind of increase have we seen during COVID? Because if we talk about the pressures on our staff, and if there's an increase in the number of referrals, we're heading towards a kind of perfect storm. And I'm just wondering if we've got any anecdotal evidence of, what sort of increase, if any, has there been during COVID, and that's in referrals. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I mean, does it have the depth of data in the report that you're able to speak to? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I mean, I'm happy to give an overview. I would speak about this at the next report, which is obviously the Chief Social Work Officer report, which gives data up until the 31st of March 2020. And at that point, we had a significant increase in demand for adult support and protection. And whilst I don't have the exact up-to-date figures, I'm happy to get those for members. We've had a continued increase in demand for adult support and protection, but 2020 to 21, alone we had 14,946 adult care referrals. So that was approximately 17 to 20% increase. But I could get you more detail to bring you up to date, but that would take us up to the 31st of March 2021. Thank you.
Okay. Does that help, Councillor Ferguson?
Well, it does actually. It should be helping all the political parties as we're heading into budget setting, because if we're sitting here with I wouldn't say time bomb, but we're sitting with a very significant rise. We'll need to, I would suggest, look for resources to meet that demand, because it's just got to put an incredible strain on an already strained service. So. I think that's where my worry is here. Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much for the answer, Lillian.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ferguson. There's a few things in the chat there just to do with attendance, but I can't see any other members wishing to speak. So with that, if we go to the recommendations, which is asking us to note the process of the inspection to date, the findings, key strengths and areas for improvement, which we've certainly looked at, and the comparative position with other authorities, in which we're doing very well, I think. So on the basis as well that we will receive that information back for members in terms of the Care Inspectorate and the details of the plan, are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Noted.
Thank you. That takes us on to item 6, which is the Chief Social Work Officer's Annual Report for 2020-2021. And Lillian, this is the spotlight's on you, and this is your document. So would you like to introduce this, and then I'll hand over to members for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing this to come a bit later than it normally would, because as the Chair's quite rightly indicated, it is my report. So I think I want to just kind of start off by saying undoubtedly the period of time covered by this report, which was the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021, was undoubtedly the hardest year ever, certainly in my time in social work, dealing with the real demands from the COVID pandemic and some of the issues that brought for all aspects of our service. However, I hope that I've managed to reflect within this report some of the good news stories where our staff went above and beyond what you would have expected, and some of the real positive feedback we had from our service users and families and other members of our partnerships in which we deliver services. I think as well the other bit that I would like to reflect before I open it up for questions is that despite the demand and response to COVID-19, our staff and children's adults in justice continued throughout the whole pandemic to have face-to-face contact with our service users and our most vulnerable members of society. And that included our social work out of our service being out in the middle of the night, being out 7 days a week, not knowing where they were going out to, what situation they were in, and whilst PPE was available, they didn't know the situations that they may be facing when they went into homes, as is always the case. But clearly, given we were in the midst of the COVID pandemic, it was a heightened response that was required, and also they continue to put themselves frontline, and they have absolutely to be commended for the way in which they continued not only to deliver our statutory duties but to respond to that crisis. So I think it's really important, and I hope I have reflected it. I've tried to show members the increased service demand, and as I say, we've put some stories which hopefully can bring to life some of the work that we've had to cover throughout this period of time. We also have found ourselves in a position of picking up areas where others may have been involved. Our third sector providers, whilst working with us, continued to provide some level of service, but clearly they stood down a lot of their services, as did some of the partner agencies. So we found ourselves being the service of last resort, as we often times are, and you know, the staff and everybody involved with social work services responded to those demands, and I put this report to members for your consideration, and I'll happily take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lillian. Over to members. Any comments or questions on the Chief Social Work Officer's report? Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, I'm going back to being a bit negative again, Chair. Reading it, it's we're going to invest in this, invest in that, invest in schools, invest in health care and activity. I'm on the same council that was when we were doing the finance just a few weeks ago. Because where's the money kind of coming for investment? As I see it just now, we couldn't buy a box of matches. We couldn't, and we'd need them to set fire to the services that we won't be able to deliver. I really think this is ambitious, to say the least. And there's nothing wrong with ambition. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Sloan. I mean, I think, firstly, this is a report reflecting a historic period, but I don't know if you want to take on board some of Councillor Sloan's feedback and if there's any response you'd like to give to that, Lillian.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Sloan. The information in this report is factual. This is the service we've already delivered, and we delivered that up until the 31st of March 2021. There's no question resources are a real challenge for social work services, and we continue to try to deliver within our budget, but obviously the first report today to members show that we do have an overspend in children's services. However, my job and the job of my senior team is to protect for the Council and to protect the most vulnerable. So undoubtedly we will continue to try to manage within our budget, but it's incumbent upon me as the Chief Social Work Officer to show to members the evidence of the service demand and what we've already delivered on. So I don't disagree with you, it's very, very difficult, but these are the factual, this is the factual report that shows the service that we have delivered over that period of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Sloan, do you want to come back?
Yes, Lillian, you're correct. It is factual, but really we've got to get into the real world, you know, and start to look to where we're going to be. I mean, I was reading in my local paper yesterday, we're looking at closing a school, I forget where it was, obviously down in the west of the region. I mean, these are just the starts. Why can't we? I don't want anybody covering my back as a member. I want to know the dirty truth of everything that's wrong out there, what we haven't got, know what we've got, and there's a hell of a lot we haven't got.
Thanks, Councillor Sloan. I mean, I think, as it was pointed out earlier in the previous item, this is the time to be aware of the demand being put on our services and how we respond to that in terms of how we set our budgets and allocate our resources to deal with some of the very challenging things that you're alluding to. That's exactly what we're here for as members, and I think we should start to see that come through in the budget setting process, recognising the pressures on the services and the demand that's been highlighted in this report and in the previous one, for example. So, Lillian, I don't know if you want to add any other comment, but clearly Councillor Sloan is finding this great trouble.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I agree with Councillor Sloan. We need to look at everything that's out there, and we've never hidden from the fact that we've got unmet need. Been very clear about that. So certainly happy to provide members if there's more information required, but I just do want to continue to reflect that this period of time is as required by the statutory duties. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. I can't see any other... Oh, sorry, Councillor Maitland.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I very much understand, Lillian, that this is an historic report. Actually, it's almost a year old now, and it's dealing with the first year of COVID. And there is no doubt about it that you have laid out that the staff stepped up with immense professionalism, and they responded to the challenge. And thank you for writing that down. I think it's important that we get that. I sympathise with Councillor Sloan's view that there's always unmet need. I totally agree with that. But the question is about not merely throwing more resource, cash and staff at a problem, but also in rejigging services. And what you've reported to us here is that has been happening. There has been changes, for example, the single access point, which I think is a great innovation when it happened. I was interested to read in the issue about the increase in levels of referral to social work localities and a decrease in the levels of referrals for occupational therapy. And I wonder if you could expand a little on that. I think that's interesting. It's a shift, and I wonder where that's going to take us in the next year or so.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. Good question. Lillian, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Maitland, and thank you for that question. I think part of the issue around the referrals to the occupational therapist during that period of time was that there was a significant amount of acute services stood down. And we do get a lot of referrals to OT from acute services and primary care. And obviously, during that period, there was a lot of those services stood down. I'm certainly not at all saying that we didn't need more occupational therapy input, but we hadn't got those referrals via the partnership. Whereas the demand for care at home and home care services and other social care services and social work services increased during the pandemic. I would hope that you would see when we do start to work on this year's report, and I accept this is nearly a year old, but when we reflect on the period from the 1st of April 2021 to March 2022, that you will see that balance returning to the levels, because we've certainly had a significant increase in demand for occupational therapy as primary and acute services start to re-engage with those that need their service. Thank you.
Councillor Maitland, does that help throw some light on the subject?
Indeed it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Stephen, for letting me in. Lillian, I appreciate this as a retrospective. I understand, that this is a statutory obligation, everything that comes forward. And I don't think there's any sensible person out there doesn't have a huge debt of gratitude to the way the social work team reacted in normal circumstances, never mind when COVID came along. That, how can I put it, input from social work was absolutely crucial to help us get through the different waves as COVID has come across here. My question really is, if I'm reading your report correctly, is that we've continued with our recruitment process, we've continued with some redeployment from the council, and most especially, if I'm reading this right, just maybe confirm, is that we are continuing with our Grow Our Own social workers team. So is it only qualified social workers we need to recruit, or are we needing to recruit others for roles that fall short of that statutory social work role? Maybe a wee bit clarification in that would be whether we should maybe think about expanding or Go Your Own from not just qualified social workers but into social care workers, for example. Any comment on that?
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. Obviously, at this committee, we've looked and made the case for funding for Grow Your Own. It maybe falls between last year and this year's report, but I don't know if you want to maybe speak to that, Lillian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Ferguson. The Council has been hugely supportive and given us some additional funding for our Grow Your Own social workers. It's absolutely crucial that we continue with that pathway, because there is a national shortage of social workers. And I know James is going to talk about the workforce plan in one of the coming reports today. But nationally, there's a huge shortage of social workers. So it's crucial that we keep those workers that wish to continue to work for social work services and want to go on and do their training, because that is the way forward as we continue to have a real issue with recruitment and retention. Particularly for social workers and senior social workers and above at all levels. There is a shortage, particularly in our care at home service and our social care workforce, which again we've been doing some targeted recruitment during the period from this report to now, and we have had some level of success, but we can't take our eye off the ball with that. We are working hard within the service to look at succession planning. We have many aspects of our workforce who bring many skills to the table, and we're looking to encourage folks to continue with a career pathway in social care and ultimately as social workers or social work assistants. So we're certainly looking at how we do that, and we're working with colleagues in O&D to help us with that process. But we do have an ongoing issue with recruitment and retention, which I have raised at this committee, and there is some work going on just now to look at terms and conditions for our social workforce, and particularly the qualified staff group. But there's certainly a lot going on at the moment to try and address this ongoing challenge. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Ferguson, does that help address the question?
Yeah, I think so. With hindsight, it's probably a better question for James and the others when they come in for the workforce plan. But yeah, thanks very much, Lillian. That's grand.
Thank you. Councillor Howie.
Thank you, Chair. Lillian, regarding to child risk register, on 31st March, there were 30 children on the child risk register, with the most prevalent risks being neglect and emotional abuse. Are you able to advise if there's any other risk factors were identified and what they were?
Councillor Howe, there's a range of areas that would allow should require us to register a child. It could be physical abuse, it could be abandonment, it could be a whole range of issues. It would be, what we've done is given the overview, because you'll appreciate with such a sensitive piece of information, if you start to move into some of the detail as to individual numbers, it might be that child becomes identified. But you know, anything that harms a child would be viewed in our eyes as child protection, and we go through a range of different assessments to then see if the child meets that criteria to be registered. Our child protection register is currently sitting at 41, so that's an area that's continued to rise throughout this period of time, and certainly the most significant rise is around domestic abuse within the home. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Howie, does that explain the figures?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have just one question, and it was relating to the developing home teams. Obviously, we've been interested in the development of home teams for some time, since the idea was sort of introduced. That's on page 80 of the papers. Now, obviously, this was last year's report, but I mean, how well is that progressing? Because obviously, you couldn't pick a worse time to develop a new service. But in spite of that, it might have actually lent itself to forcing that to work better and quicker. So, is there any more information on that?
Yeah, I can certainly provide members with an update, Chair. We're moving forward with the home teams. We're at the point now that we're in consultation with trade unions, or we're about to be in consultation with trade unions and our colleagues in HR around the matching of staff to that redesign and restructure of the Health and Social Care Partnership Service. So we're making progress, and we certainly will be able to, in the coming months, give members an update on the progress that is making. But certainly the consultation, the engagement with staff has all been undertaken, and we are now moving to the implementation, which will take some time, without a shadow of a doubt. But we're at the next stage now, and as I say, we'll continue to give members an update. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. I see no further questions or hands raised in the room or on the chat function. So if we go to the recommendations, which is, are we happy to note Lillian's report?
Noted.
Okay, thank you very much. So that takes us on to item 7, which is the Integrated Workforce Plan, Health and Social Care. And we've got James McDowell here to speak to this, and Anna Toot, forgive me if I've pronounced your name, mispronounced it. And I don't know if you want to introduce a few of the key themes of this, James, for members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just through yourself, if I can, just to sort of set the scene, as it were. So, absolutely, Anna and I are part of a workforce group that has obviously LA local authority representation, but also from all members of the partnership. So together we've worked and we've produced this plan that you see before you today. So we're here obviously to give it an airing, as we say, and get some feedback on it that we can take back to the group and ultimately to the IGIB for final rubber stamping later on in March. So happy to take any sort of comments and questions as we go through it. As you said there, it's building on the sort of strategic commission intentions that are set out within there. And then it's sort of set down into the 5 themes, the ambitions and some actions. So as I say, we're happy to take some comments, some questions coming back at us, and we'll try and answer them the best way we can, but also take a note of them so we can make sure they're in the plan as we're going forward through this draft. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Now, is there any questions or comments from members initially? I've certainly got one I'll maybe just ask at the start, just about national pay scales. It does, I think, in page 104 and 106, it does talk about this kind of equalisation of rates of pay, for example, for equal work, if you like. And we've heard at this committee a number of times just about some of the struggles we've had in terms of being one of the lowest paid for social work, that is, across Scotland. So can you maybe sort of speak a bit more about that and what sort of impact or what positives that might bring for recruitment and retention here?
Absolutely. Through yourself, Chair, I think, Lillian touched on it earlier there, just about the social work element of it, just to look at those T's and C's to see if we can incorporate something that makes it more attractive to come down to Dumfries and Galloway. So that is something that we're looking at. I think within the plan itself, under on page 115, looking at the pay terms and conditions, it's an ambition that's within this plan about to try and consolidate in some shape or form right across the region, right across our partners, but understanding we are different organisations with different T's and C's. So we need to take consideration of that. On the retention, it is a big element. Just before Christmas, Anna and the team, we were out doing the recruitment events locally. So we reached out to 4 areas within the region to try and attract as many people as we can into social care, which was very successful. But there is that turnover, there is that churn, and it's an ongoing process that it gives us a bit of of a solution, but it's only one element of that solution. We need to look, grow our own, as was touched on earlier, getting in early to our schools. We need to get into our schools and our colleges to try and get as many younger people as we can into this career, and really highlight those career pathways. It is a great career, and we really need to sort of get in early. That early intervention in the S3, S4, and school leavers is where we're going to look at in the coming months and year. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. And while I wait for other contributors to come in terms of that social care qualification, I did notice that on page, theme 3, I think it was, or ambition 3, page 111 anyway, just about the potential for that qualification. I mean, is that something we would deliver through our schools, or who would construct that course, and would it need to be accredited? And is that part of the thing you're looking at in terms of giving it that credibility, if you like?
Through yourself, Chair, absolutely. We would work in partnership with our local colleges, and we do that regularly anyway. But I think you're absolutely right. It needs to have some sort of accreditation attached to it. So we would do that. And as we said earlier, it is about mapping that pathway. I think we need to map that and show the benefits of what what qualifications you can gain through it, what experience, what the work that involves within it. So I think that early intervention and that qualification will prove dividends on that.
Thank you. Now, I've still not seen any hands raised, so it must, I mean, the way you've done the report must just reflect the comprehensive nature of the detail you've gone into. So aside from that, I don't have any further questions, and I can't see any in the room. Councillor Maitland, right at the death there, she's got a question. Councillor Maitland, please.
Sorry, Chairman. What I wanted to say is it's a really comprehensive plan. I mean, I know this has been through the integration joint board, and we've looked carefully at this 2 or 3 times, actually, and it is very comprehensive. It's a great partnership document because it's a real effort to try and get the third sector and the independent sector also showing what level of contribution they bring to the workforce, because it's a comprehensive workforce. We all play a part. Everybody plays a part in producing better outcomes for everyone. The only slightly depressing part I found in it was the issue about the difficulty in asking staff to work across different ways. And I think I'm really probably thinking about the home teams issue. Home teams is incredibly important. Really, really. It's a most fundamental change in the way that we deliver care to people, and that they participate in their own improvement. How, I suppose really what I'm asking is, how can we get the message across to staff that their contribution is just so important to make that jump from an old-fashioned way of doing things, along silo lines, as opposed to a team approach, and that their contribution is vital. And I see from here that there are still difficulties. So, what can we do, perhaps, to really assure staff that what they will be doing will be an advance in their own practice, their own careers, and to make such a difference to the population of Dumfries and Galloway? Question.
Thanks very much, Councillor Maitland. And over to you, James.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point, and I think comms for me, communication, engagement, I think is got to be up there. Certainly from my thinking anyway, Councillor Maitland. I think we need to communicate the importance of that role and the benefits and the change that it can actually make in people's lives, right at that front line. And I think that comms, that engagement is how that can be done. And and probably celebrating success as well. I think we need to do that. We need to make our staff aware of the success that happens, and report that back. I think we can sometimes just move on to the next thing, whereas it's good to communicate the benefits and the good news stories, as it were.
Thanks, James. Councillor Maitland, does that give you some confidence at least?
Well, I'm sure that we do need to do that, Chairman. But I suppose I'm really thinking that perhaps that it needs to be made very clear that is part and parcel of what we're doing. I mean, I think we're on. It's progress. We can't turn back from where we've got to now. But the quicker we do it, the more we will be able to help people with their requirements. Care at home, home care, and everything else, all the other services that contribute to people having better outcomes in their lives.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. I think I'll bring Lillian in, because obviously we touched on this a little bit in the last item, just because it's reached a certain stage in its development. So, Lillian, do you want to come in on that one?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Maitland. We've obviously done a huge amount of engagement with our staff within the partnership, and the feedback through the events that we've had is that they are they are keen to be part of this, and they want to make that transition into this new way of working, because they do all believe that this, well, not all, but the majority believe that this is the way forward. I think one of the challenges that we've got is that there's so much uncertainty at a national level. We're still waiting for the outcome in the consultation for the National Care Service, and without a doubt social work in particular could be finding themselves practising in a very different way dependent on the outcome of that consultation. So we are working with staff to try and give them some reassurance, but we are working just now on effectively an unknown way forward for the delivery, both in terms of where you may practice from, how you might deliver your service, but nonetheless our staff are very keen to make sure that the home teams is a development which will deliver better services for our communities, and that's really where social work always start from. So I think it is a difficult time to engage with staff, and there is quite a significant impact on morale at the moment, because we don't know what the future holds for ourselves as a profession, but also in terms of what it means to be part of a national care service if we do move away from the local authority as your employer. So all of those factors mean that it's quite a challenging and difficult time just now for staff, but we're certainly supporting them to understand the different ways in which we would hope to continue to develop and deliver services effectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. Councillor Maitland, does that help add a bit of colour to the response?
I think the more open we are about the changes that are coming down the line, and the more that we do actually discuss, and that the public understands, and that staff understand, and that we as elected members understand, I think the better. I don't think this needs to be in any way or shape or form swept under the carpet. I think we need to be completely open about the opportunities, and yes, I accept the threats that staff perhaps will, but no. Well, thank you, Lillian. I think you probably teased out one or two of the issues.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. We now have Councillor Ferguson to speak.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Morning, Jamie. Viv, I see Viv's on the call as well. There's the issue I'm going to talk about here. You've got a whole page of the report. Page 106 is about the difference in salaries and salary scales. Sorry, I forgot to say hello to you as well, Anna. I suppose it's the unanswerable question, isn't it? How do we get the salaries across the whole sector, not just the statutory sectors, to be level? Because until we do, there is no levelling up. And I know that we've had some success in recruiting new social care staff, but if you think for a minute that if we employ 30 new people and 15 of them have come from the voluntary or independent sector, that's not a recruitment, that's a transfer, right? So there are no new members of staff coming in, they're just new members of staff coming into a particular part of the service, but it leaves a vacancy somewhere else, and we need to fill that other vacancy. So I'm actually wondering here is what more can we do? Right? I'm thinking here at IGB, I'm thinking here council, I'm thinking here at NHS. What more can we do to actually try and get a real levelling up and recognition that somebody in an independent care home or a third sector setting is just as important as somebody in a social work advanced team or an NHS at homes team? They're just as important because they're doing basically the same job and they're getting considerably less an hour. I know it's a perpetual hot potato, Jamie, but how do we get? How are we trying to get round that?
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. James, you want to have a go at that?
I can have a go at it through yourself, Chair. I absolutely understand what Councillor Ferguson is saying there, and within the plan that the ambitions that are there through those themes, there is an ambition there to try and obviously review it and try and make changes to Councillor Ferguson within there, understanding all the parties that have to contribute to that. So there is an ambition there within the plan to try and to try to review it, obviously, and then trying to put improvements in there if possible as we move forward through the duration of this workforce plan. So I think, I don't know if I've answered it the best way, but it's the best I can at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Ferguson, is that at least some way towards addressing your point?
Well, I think it's. I mean, I appreciate it. It was a no-win situation. I put Jamie in there. But I think Lillian touched on it, because we'll need to wait to see what the outcome of the new care regime is, because a lot of that was brought about through the Feely report, through representations from the independent and the third sector organisations. So I suppose it's a watching brief, and we'll just need to be kept updated on it as it goes through. I'll welcome the final document come to the IGB, and we'll see what happens then. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. Okay, we have Councillor Sloan to come in.
Thanks, Chair. And I'm not too sure when we're speaking about health and social care, National Health Service, exactly where the power lies at times. I do get confused. But my colleague and I, Willie Scobie, spoke to Julie just before the Christmas break up. And one of the things where she fully agreed with us on, that the two main ways that we can improve our service within home care and social work, etc., is to enhance the wages. Now, there's no doubt about it, but not just enhance the wages. There's got to be a career path for the young people coming in, so they can see themselves going somewhere. I mean, they don't want to be scrubbing floors all their days. Has there been any feedback at all from Julie on that?
Thanks, Councillor Sloan. I mean, I know it certainly does talk about mapping a career path in the document, and maybe James can add a bit about that. But I see Lillian's maybe wanting to come in to comment initially, so thank you. Lillian?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Sloan. I'll let James come in just in terms of the mapping and the way forward. But, you know, we are bound by the Scottish Excel contracts that are awarded, and the living wage is set within those contracts. So sometimes if we wanted to do different aspects of delivery for a commission service, it's difficult to do that, because we are required by law to work within the Scottish Excel settlement figures that are given. So it's a very, very difficult one. It's a very complex arena, and part of the kind of delegated powers sit with the Health and Social Care Partnership, the IGB. Thank you.
Do you want to hear from James just in terms of the mapping of the career plan, or do you want to come back in? Okay, on you go.
Well,
Right, thanks. James, do you want to maybe respond to the mapping the career path, because it does touch on it in the report. Maybe it doesn't have the detail maybe that members would want to see, but maybe that's the work in progress, if you like.
Absolutely, through yourself, Chair. Absolutely, I think that is the work that's in progress, and it was a good bit of feedback that came back through the workshop that we recently held on the plan, and just round about those career pathways. As I touched on earlier, we're starting that process with our education colleagues. Just starting to make inroads into some of those S3, S4s and school leavers, to try and just start to map out what that career pathway would look like. Work experience is a big part of it as well. If they can come in for 2 or 3 weeks just to sample that element of work experience and get in. Early intervention is where it needs to be at for regards to getting our carers of the future, as it were, because if we leave it till 19, 20, 21, they've already found other careers elsewhere. So the early intervention for me, and that's where the mapping starts, and putting it down and picture format about where they can go, where they can eventually end up within health and social care is something that we're doing through that mapping exercise.
Thanks, James. Councillor Sloan, do you want to come back in, and then I'll bring in Councillor Maitland?
Very briefly, Chair. It's just, Lillian quite rightly says, that we as a council would love to go down a road with money, career paths, etc. And it's quite clear that it's the Scottish Government that's inhibiting this. And I think that's the message we have got to get out. The Scottish Government is stopping us getting what we need and the elderly people getting what they need.
Well, I mean, your feedback's noted, Councillor Sloan. I'm not sure everybody would agree, but you can certainly take that on board. Councillor Maitland.
Thanks very much. This was a question. As I was reading this, James, Viv, Anna, as I was reading this, I was very conscious of the numbers of part-time workers that we've got. It really is, it's very high, isn't it? I don't know whether it compares, differently elsewhere nationally, but has there been any thought at all about seeing whether there was any possibility of people doing another hour, if you see what I mean, which might just do a little bit of help, or possibly changing, they might, circumstances might have moved, or what one might be able to provide as an employer just might mean that it is possible for somebody to do the extra hour and help out in that way. I was just very conscious that it did seem to be a lot of part-time working.
Yeah, do you want to come back on that, James?
I can do, absolutely. Through yourself, Chair, Councillor Maitland, as part of the sort of workforce task group that was set up just October, November time last year. They were the sort of elements that we were looking at, obviously recruitment events and that recruitment drive, but also looking internally at our existing staff and giving them the opportunity to take on extra hours if they so wish. So that was all part of that sort of package, as it were, of trying to address those workforce pressures at that time. And that will continue to happen as well through the recruitment events and also those additional hours as we move forward. So hopefully that reassures you slightly. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Councillor Maitland, is that...
Thanks.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I was just going to quickly ask, because I don't see any other questions in the chat, just in terms of hybrid working, and there's a chart there just on page 139, just showing the breakdown of the subsector, obviously, and the highest headcount is in housing, support, care at home, and then closely followed, well, not quite closely followed, but next followed by care homes for adults. And I just sort of wondered, obviously hybrid working is all very well for certain roles, but there's certain posts which it's just not a substitute for face-to-face or personal contact. So there's only sort of a limited amount of gain in some of the roles that we have for that. So have we got different strategies and tactics for maybe making the most of those, the fact that a lot of the workforce can only benefit so much from hybrid working, if you like?
Yeah, through yourself, Chair, obviously, yeah, absolutely. I think you've said a valuable point there that the roles here within the health and social care predominantly are at the coalface front lines, so they don't lend themselves to that hybrid working. I think as an attraction, though, they need to sort of offer up the sort of digital opportunities that may arise from some of the roles as we go forward, especially to attract younger people. I think that's where the digital transformation that'll develop in health and social care as we move forward will allow some of the roles to be more digitally savvy and have the digital skills required to undertake some of those roles that may attract some of the younger people into the roles that we need going forward. So maybe not answering about the hybrid working, but I do think there's an element of that digital transformation that we need to harness and use as a way of attracting younger people to the career pathway in the industry as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Right, I think we've given that a good airing, I think. So if we maybe want to move to recommendations now, which we've been asked to note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. 2.1 is the Integrated Workforce Plan for Health and Social Care for 2022 to 25. 2.2, the Workforce Plan will be reviewed on an ongoing basis and reported to Integration Joint Board and this committee here. And at 2.3, the partnership will develop operational workforce plans, which I think we'll look forward to seeing, which complement the strategic aims of the integrated workforce plan. So are members happy to agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That takes us on to, thanks very much. Sorry, James, you've had a good grilling there. Thanks very much for that.
Because apparently Westminster can't pay a bill, and I don't mean to be cheeky, Teresa, but should you not be sorting the Brexit?
Well, we've got an unexpected contributor to the committee today, but in the background. So if we move on then to item 8, which is the Dumfries and Galloway Integration Joint Board Health and Social Care Strategic Commissioning Plan 2022-25, and we've got Viv here from NHS to speak to the report. Viv, I don't know if you want to. We've seen this a wee bit in recent times, and there's been various sort of consultation events and workshops and whatnot. So I don't know if you maybe want to highlight some of the key changes in the draft in front of us today. If you introduce your report, thank you.
I'll do, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, so you're quite right, Chair. Members have seen this document, I think, at least 2 or 3 times, and hopefully contributed to the engagement and consultation work. The idea is to take this plan forward to the Integration Joint Board for approval, and their meeting is on the 10th of March. So you're seeing this at almost final stage, but wanted to make sure that colleagues had a chance to have a look at it, given that it has changed a bit since you saw it in August. The main changes really are around there's now 7 strategic commissioning intentions. We've combined 2 of those together, which makes it a little bit shorter. We've also reduced the number and got a bit more clarity around the tactical priorities, which is where the partnership or the Integration Joint Board are seeking the partnership to spend its resources, time and effort around delivery of those. We've changed, and I think this is probably the most significant changes, that we've taken the section that had previously been the Making It Happen section, which had a big table with lots and lots of actions within it. We've actually taken that out and are in the process of developing a partnership delivery plan. So we've highlighted within here that this is describing how the partnership will respond to the IJB Strategic Commissioning Plan and move from strategy to delivery. And those other documents are all described there. And of course, that's complementing what you've just heard from James around the workforce plan, the integrated workforce plan there. And I think that also adding the detail that we have underneath the model of care, sort of describing what that sort of shift, that transformation that we're looking for in terms of the way that we're working, is also reflected through the plan that you've just seen from James. And I expect that the delivery plan and financial recovery plan, etc., will all be coming through Social Work Committee in due course. So we are, as I say, this is almost final. It's been proofread a bit since then and a little bit of jigging around, but you will see the final version at your next meeting, which I think is the 24th of March, but that will be after it's been approved by Integration Joint Board. So really reflecting what we've had from the public and from other stakeholders throughout the quite extensive consultation. We have spent quite a bit of time on that, and actually you'll also see the statement of consultation will come forward too, which will give you some assurance about how much involvement we've seen from those stakeholders and public throughout what has been quite a difficult time to do that, given the pandemic restrictions and so on. So just really looking for committee to note that the content and the change to the format that's in there, and that we'll be taking this forward to Integration Joint Board to be signed off at the beginning of March, and we'll share with you after that the final document alongside the delivery plan, and the other plans that will go with will also come to you at that point. So I'm going to stop there, Chair, but very happy to take any questions or comments that anyone might have. And I also just say thank you to colleagues who have contributed to the development of this important document. Thank you.
Thanks, Viv. And I see Liz has joined us on the call as well. So hopefully, if there's any questions, you can both cover those. So, members, we've got in front of us the latest draft, if you like, of the commissioning plan. Do we have any comments? Appreciating we'll see this back at the next committee after it's been ratified or agreed by the IGB. So, over to members. Any comments or questions? I think we're maybe very familiar with this report, so there's maybe not much to add. Obviously, appreciating the changes that you've outlined. So I'm not seeing any hands go up or anything in the chat. So members, are we happy to go to the recommendations and note the content and format of this final draft commissioning plan?
Noted.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Viv and Liz, for joining us today. And for waiting so long to come in after the last report. But thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye-bye. And that takes us on to item 9, which is the sharing intelligence for Health and Care Group annual feedback. This is the first time we'll maybe have seen this report at Social Work Services Committee. And the members will be aware, from reading it, there's quite a dense amount of information and intelligence available in it. We have Ananda Allen from NHS to speak to the report. Ananda, tell us a bit about this report, because obviously it'll be new to a lot of members, first time seeing this at this committee. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So there are 7 public bodies that provide oversight and inspection services to NHS Dumfries and Galloway. And every year they meet and draw together all of their evidence to compare notes and just to make sure that nothing's being missed and that all of the evidence that they're finding is consistent. This is the first year that they have mentioned anything in relation to social care. So the Chief Exec has agreed to share this report with you, mostly to highlight the very positive findings where they did mention health and social care. And if I can draw your attention to paragraphs 3.92 and 3.93, in particular, they mentioned the strong social work leadership that we have in this region. They commented very positively about how we had worked together in collaborative working during the pandemic, not just between the local authority and the NHS, but also within the third sector and the independent sector. And they also commented on the positive approach we have to community engagement here. So this is the first time you will have seen all of this evidence drawn together. Obviously, the NHS board will be addressing any actions that have fallen out of this. But in the spirit of partnership working, they wanted to share this with you just to pass on the positive comments. And I think going forward, it's likely that there will be further mention because, integration is maturing. There will probably be further mention of how we work together. And if that's the case, we will continue to bring this report to you just for your information and to just, in the spirit of openness. So I'm happy to bring back any comments to the NHS board if you want to discuss it.
Thanks, Ananda. And obviously, the report in front of us is there for us to note the findings. And obviously, it's good to see that, just to even have sight of that information is quite illuminating. But members, any questions or comments that Ananda might be able to answer? Councillor Lever.
Thanks, Chair. It's 3.94, the highlighted £16 million of savings still to be identified. That's an eye-watering amount of savings given where we are in the financial year. Could we have an update on that? What's the impact going to be? Thank you. Thanks,
Councillor Lever. Ananda, I don't know if you can address that. Obviously, it is highlighted there in the report.
It is, yes. So we do have a financial recovery plan that's in place and being ratified through our governance processes. I couldn't speak to that personally, but I'm not quite sure because of the partnership whether it's most appropriate to ask the IGB for a response on where we are with that, or the NHS board. I think it's probably the IGB we would ask for a response, but I can take that back and ask them for some commentary.
Okay, thanks, Ananda. I see our strong leadership of the social work services wants to come in on that one. So over to you, Lillian.
Thank you, Chair. It would be Councillor Lever. I'm happy to ask Katie Kerr, who is the Director of Finance for the partnership, to provide an update to committee if required. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lever. Any other questions or comments from members? I appreciate it'll be new and there's quite a lot of information there to take in, just to note the findings. So I'll give it a couple of minutes while people, to let all that information percolate. And I think members want to just go to the recommendations in this case. So Amrembi is happy to note the findings of the report. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, members, and thanks, Ananda, today for your input. And we'll look forward to future reports at future committees. Thank you very much. That takes us on to item 10, which is the Dumfries and Galloway Public Protection Committee minute of meeting 19th of October 2021. This is for noting. Are we happy to note the minutes? Thank you very much. And that takes us on to the last item, which is that I have no other business deemed urgent. And that's the end of the meeting. Thanks very much for everybody's input today, and a safe onward journey. Thank you.